hasn't just been losing its proxy wars, it's also losing its propaganda wars. And after seeing this video, I think I know why.
It's giving secure. OGs. Fit check. Main character energy. Canon event. Millennial gray vibes. Let them cook. Squad goals. They understood the assignment. Big L if you miss the youth summit.
Yep. I had to see that and experience that, and so you had to as well. Yeah, we both going to partake in that suffering. I have so many questions. Like, did my guy actually understand what understood the assignment means? Because clearly he didn't understand the assignment. Like, did y'all not have enough money in the NATO military propaganda budget to actually get somebody from Gen Z to collab with y'all on these phrases that I would say about half of them have nothing to do with Gen Z? They're just general phrases that people say on the internet. It literally sounds like dude just went to ChatGPT, typed in, give me shit people say on social media, and then they record a TikTok video. NATO is either so lazy, so out of touch, or both. And they didn't think that it would be a bright idea to maybe have somebody from the youth demographic to promote their youth summit. Instead, they got the creepy imperialist NATO version of Mr. Rogers to do a TikTok video. And all of a sudden, the constant and cataclysmic failures of NATO over the last few years are starting to make all the sense in the world. What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of For the People podcast. And of course, as always, I am your humble host, Niko House. It is appropriate that we start off with the hotspot video about NATO's failures, given that we are going to be talking about Ibrahim Traore, Africa, Burkina Faso, and effectively one of the biggest NATO failures to date that has led to a cataclysmic impact on not only Burkina Faso, the rest of West Africa, but Africa as a whole. And the rest of the world seems to be inspired by Ibrahim Traore's story and his meteoric rise. And to discuss that today, I have a very special guest. Most of you have seen his work in writing. Some of you have probably followed him on Twitter as well. And you know him as the newest member of our Hotspot family, David Hundeyin. Let me go ahead and bring him in. What's going on, Dave? How you doing, man?
I am great. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
All right.
It's a pleasure. Hey, it's full circle. I feel like the last time you were on, we were actually talking about the recent, basically overthrowing of Niger, how Burkina Faso and Mali, and now, you know, a couple years have gone by, and this is where we're at. The world's talking about it now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be living through it, actually.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like that we're in it's definitely a different time in the respect that before they would be able to get away with taking out these African leaders who were trying to lead their country to success independent of Western imperialists, because before, like, we didn't have social media, or if we did, it wasn't, people weren't discussing politics. They weren't as interested in African politics, especially, and they were able to get away with things like Libya, what they did with Gaddafi, Lumumba. And I mean, really, I guess between 2019 and 2021, they killed a bunch of African leaders that no one really paid attention to. And now we're in a time where the entire world is singing the praise of Ibrahim. So I'm curious to know, what do you think about what Ibrahim has done so far? And what do you think about its impact that it's had on the rest of West Africa and Africa as a whole?
So the most important thing that I think needs to be acknowledged is that for the first time, certainly in my lifetime, an attempt, the first part of the regime change attempt has failed. And that is basically the ritual demonization of a certain character whom they don't like. So this was a script that has been played multiple times successfully. So we saw it with Saddam Hussein, we saw it with Bashar al-Assad, we saw it with Muammar Gaddafi, Robert Mugabe, any name you can think of who was perceived as an anti-Western person who needed to be taken out of power by in some way, shape, or form, the first stage was always a total blackening of the person's name and turning the person into this cartoon pantomime villain. So I remember growing up in Nigeria, right, which is like 2 borders away from Libya, and I remember thinking that Muammar Gaddafi was this brute that had horns growing out of his head, was this evil person, because that was all the information that I had access to back then. Back then, information was so tightly controlled, especially on the African continent, that obviously the internet wasn't really a thing. This was in the 90s, so all you really had was cable TV, and the entire continent was basically subject to a single monopoly called DSTV, which was owned by white South African. So you know how that goes. So what CNN said was the word of God, right? What the magazines that we used to buy, so Newsweek and Time Magazine and The Economist, whatever they said was the voice of God. So if they said that Muammar Gaddafi,
interesting considering that Gaddafi became the chairman of the African Union shortly after that.
Yeah, so it's funny how that works, because something else I think you will come to appreciate about the African continent, or how the African continent used to be, was that there was this huge dichotomy of information that was available. So those in leadership might know what's going on, but just a step or two below them, I'm not talking about the hoi polloi, these are still members of the supposed elite, just not quite at that level of the elite. They have no idea what's going on. So, and that's kind of the category that the family that I came from fit into. So we used to parrot all the standard talking points about democracy and civil freedoms and human rights and all this sort of like Western NGO talk, right? Which somehow we were brainwashed into thinking was the foundation of national development. And anyone who didn't fit into that paradigm could only be a horrible brute that deserved whatever was going to happen to him. So I remember in 2011, people in Nigeria actually, well, I wouldn't say everyone, but there were a large number of people in Nigeria who actually celebrated when Muammar Gaddafi was taken out in the brutal manner that he was, because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't understand geopolitics in any significant way. All we understood was this is a bad person and there's been a revolution.
Correct me if I'm wrong, David, but Nigeria is one of the countries that's been especially subjected to this idea of Western exceptionalism, right? Indoctrinated into this Western idealism that like the more Western you are, the better you are as a person, effectively.
Exactly. And this has been done in multiple ways. This has been done through the school system. This has been done through religion, even though a lot of people really aren't ready to hear that. It's been done in multiple ways, and especially through the governance system. So this is the case across much of sub-Saharan Africa, where let's say there's a parliamentary debate to be had when new legislation is to be pushed through or whatever. You'll find out that the hearing, where there's a public hearing for this thing, you find out that there might be more white people at the hearing than there are people from that country. And it's people from all these NGOs and international organizations. And even as a citizen of that country, you might not even be aware that there is this process taking place that is going to affect your life. So again, it's that thing about like having a two-tiered information system. So there are foreigners in your country that know the country better than you do. There are foreigners in the country that have more access to the levels of power in that country than you do. There are foreigners in the country that have a much clearer historical and present understanding of the context you exist in than you do. And they're very happy to keep you in your state of ignorance.
I was going to say that actually speaks volumes to how they've been able to control most of Africa for so long. And it speaks volumes to the fact that they know that if Africans actually had access to the information that we have access to now, especially back then they wouldn't have been able to get away with a lot of what they were able to get away with for so long. People think that and it's not just an African thing, right? I feel like the majority of the world is like that. If you don't have access to information, you're not going to know the system is broken, or especially you're not going to know that the system is being broken on purpose. And so if you don't have information, how can you fix the problem? And so I feel like there was a concerted effort to make sure that Africans were kept in the dark because we see what's happening now, right? The continent of Africa.
It absolutely was a concerted effort. I mean, when you look at it from a wider angle, you then start to realize that, hang on, this is how come wired telephony was never really allowed to become a thing for the longest time. We didn't really, statistically, most of Africa didn't really get access to telephones until maybe the late 90s or the early 90s, because mobile technology became ubiquitous and it was inescapable. And very, very, very crucially, which is a part of the story that isn't told enough, the entry of China into the global tech market made a lot of this equipment accessible. So most of these mobile networks across the continent are actually built on Chinese infrastructure. I think many people do not know that. So Huawei and the likes, those are the backbone of a lot of like mobile internet infrastructure in Africa. And that's when Africa really started coming out of its informational dark age. So in the late 90s and the noughties, statistically, it was maybe around 2011, 2012 that roughly 50% of Africans had access to high-speed, cheap internet. And that number has only grown since then. Yeah. So again, you can appreciate why, as recently as 2011, it was possible to take out the president of Africa's most successful country, and Africans were celebrating. You can understand, but we had no idea what was going on. We were completely locked out of the information economy. We had no idea, right?
Yeah, but, I mean, and I remember reading about how like limited how limited your ability to travel from one African country to another was. Like it was easier for Europeans and Americans to travel from one African country to another than Africans who live in Africa, which is crazy. I live in South America, because a Brazilian can go to Argentina without a passport.
Exactly.
Yeah, Argentina and Venezuela, they can just go in and out without a passport.
Also by design. You might even be surprised to know that sometimes it's actually easier to travel as an African to Europe than to another African country. So if I'm using my Nigerian passport and I want to travel to the UK or France or whatever, all I need to do is apply for a UK visa or a Schengen visa. It will take a couple of weeks, and if I have enough money, because that's the main thing, I'll get the visa, right? Because it's basically a class thing, it's an economic thing. Now, if I want to get a visa to Cape Verde, which is also in West Africa, that's a whole other thing. Right?
Really?
Those are two countries in the same region on the same continent. This is all by design, right? Because where the continent is able to have that economic and political convergence, then a lot of these problems disappear almost overnight, really. Maybe it's over the past 5 to 10 years that we started to appreciate the reality that pretty much the entire economic system of the world, the industrial model of the global economy, is built on African resource inputs. Technically, Africa is the only continent which, given the presence of enough technology, doesn't actually need to import anything from any other continent. It literally has everything. And yet it has the poorest people in the world. How does that work? So the more you examine this picture, the more you realize that this is a very, very carefully managed project to keep a certain group of people in mental darkness, to keep them in physical poverty, and to keep them constantly misdirected and distracted. So even the supposed elites, the people who are supposed to be the intellectual elites, who have gone to school abroad, people like myself, for the longest time, we just misdirected down an endless number of rabbit holes, because again, this is like NGO civil society thing, which is a huge problem in my opinion, because it's almost entirely funded from outside of the continent for other people's purposes. You just constantly get bombarded with information that, with the benefit of hindsight, is simply not true. Yeah. So you are.
And it's crazy how easy it is to perceive. Like it's not. Yeah. I laugh at myself when I think about some of the things I used to believe, about, and not just Africa, just in general. I'm like, how did I not realize that? I thought I was intelligent, right? But when you get bombarded, and then they always use the consensus, right? The consensus is the consensus
exactly.
And,
experts believe, So and this isn't just with regards to geopolitics. This is even with regards to something as simple as energy or industrialization. So according to this NGO industrial complex, Africa, which has 3% of global trade, just 3% of global trade, supposedly Africa should be doing this thing called an energy transition. Now, I'm not aware that it's possible to transition from one form of energy to another when you don't even have energy in the first place, right? You barely have enough electricity, and you're being told that you should not explore your energy reserves. So your gas reserves, your coal, your crude oil, you shouldn't touch those things.
Literally everything I have, everything.
Wind and renewables and stuff that doesn't really exist, right? Meanwhile, the same people telling you not to explore your energy reserves are then buying those energy reserves from you for pennies on the dollar, right? So South Africa is being paid by Germany not to mine its coal, but Germany is buying coal from South Africa.
So hold on,
make that make sense?
Create a demand for it? What? I'm confused. Why are they paying them not to mine?
The idea is the Germans are saying coal is dirty, coal is bad for the environment, so we will give you a grant to not mine coal, to not use coal for your energy generation, and we're gonna provide you with technology for renewables and yada yada yada. Even though that doesn't really do anything for you, and yet at the same time we are gonna buy coal, that same dirty coal, we're gonna buy it from you and use it for our industry.
Okay, yeah. So it's they're paying them not to mine the coal for themselves, but the coal that you do mine, we're gonna hold that for you. That's crazy.
Yeah, that sounds. And it's for pennies on the dollar.
So I wanna now. With all that being said, we see how Burkina Faso, for example, is industrializing from within the nation. They created a tomato factory there. He just got done actually creating a cashew factory. I mean, they're using every single tool at their disposal, things that I wouldn't even think of. Like when they said that there was going to be a cashew, I was like, oh, that's actually kind of genius, because cashews are actually very hard to come by, and usually they're being imported. If you're eating cashews, it's normally they're being imported from somewhere. Like even how he nationalized the 2 gold mines recently, or I guess that was last year. So recently, do you see other countries or other people in African nations, whether it be in West Africa and other African nations, looking at this and be like, hey, yo, what's going on? Why aren't we doing this?
That's exactly what is going to happen. And that, by the way, is exactly why he's viewed as such a dangerous person, because I give this maybe 2 to 3 years, and then the impact is going to be undeniable, because presently the narrative is that, oh, nothing is really happening. This is all fake news. You're all exaggerating it. He's not that good. This is Russian propaganda, all that usual stuff, right? But within 2 to 3 years, it's going to become unavoidably true, because you're going to start seeing the real world economic impact. What you mentioned about cashews, for example, they're not just food. They're an industrial input. So they're used in makeup. They're used in confectionery. They're used in a whole bunch of applications. So again, how this global industrial model is built is that if you're an African country, you're meant to export the raw cashew. So the exploration of the supply chain is meant to be done elsewhere, because that's where the real money is. That's not for you, right? Your job as an African is to be poor. So what he is doing is he's saying we are going to domesticate a large part of that value chain. So instead of exporting the raw cashew, we're going to add value in country, right? So the stuff that used to be done in Vietnam or in China or wherever, or in Laos or in Cambodia, we're going to do it here. We're going to capture more of that value, and then we're going to export something that is, if not a finished product, that is closer to a finished product. So we capture more of the value chain, which, by the way, is the basic economic problem of Africa. Africa exports raw materials, and it's by design, right? Mm-hmm. It's to say, so the pushback that he's facing because of what he's doing is similar to the pushback that Aliko Dangote in Nigeria is facing, because for the first time in maybe 4 or 5 decades, Nigerian oil is not just being exported as raw crude oil. It's actually being refined in country. Value is being added.
Yeah.
And he's actually, the country is actually, well, if not the country, at least him, an African, is actually capturing a part of the value chain that Europe had monopolized for the longest time. And European refiners are going out of business as a direct result of a refinery on the West African coast. That's a very big problem for them. Oh, yeah.
That's great.
Before
putting companies out of business.
Before this conversation ends, I'll just pop the link in here. There was an article about this. I think it was on Bloomberg a few weeks ago. I think it's Shell, the Shell refinery in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. They're having a huge problem now, right? A lot of these refineries on the coast of Western Europe are having a problem because West Africa used to be their gold mine, right? It's where all the best, so the grade of crude oil that is gotten from West Africa is called light sweet crude. It's very easy to refine, very high grade. It attracts a premium. So that's where they get the best crude oil. A lot of it for pennies on the dollar because, again, how much of it is even being stolen, you don't know. And then that's where you go to sell because they don't refine it. Even though they're selling you crude oil, they don't refine crude oil. So they take the finished product at a higher price. So you take a premium product from them, and then you blend it with the less premium product from like the US or Venezuela or Canada, and then you sell the like really high sulfur petrol and diesel, to the stuff that causes bronchitis and stuff. You sell that to West Africa, right? The low grade stuff. For the longest time, that's how that system of economics work. Now, what Traore is doing is that he's showing that there's no magic, there's no like highly specialized, extremely complicated system involved in domesticating your value chain. That if you export a resource, you can and should domesticate at least part of the value chain of that resource. There's no law. There's no
workers ready to help and assist in that process. It isn't like, I feel like the U.S., we don't have the economy like I don't know, I guess you would call it an industrial economy with physical workers.
The US is a post-industrial economy. So
yeah, we're exactly service economy, or very automated, obviously. And some of that stuff can't be helped. But in Africa, at the point that they're at, especially in like Burkina Faso, you're not automated. You have the manpower, you have the labor power. They were already doing the work. You just need to figure out how to make sure that it works for you now.
Exactly. And the cost of labor is low. So these things don't cost an arm and a leg. So what you're going to find out is that even Southeast Asia eventually is going to start getting a pinch from this, because a lot of production that currently happens in that part of the world is going to start migrating here when more African countries start realizing that, hey, what this Traore guy is doing, and they're getting rich off of it. Why can't we do that? It's going to happen, right? And that's why the powers that be are so determined to get him out of power now before it starts to gain critical mass. That's why it's so important, because right now they're not rich yet. Sorry?
No, I was just going to ask, do you remember? So whenever we had this conversation about how Niger was separating from France, Mali, and Burkina Faso, at the beginning, they were hyper focused on Niger and didn't actually say much about Ibrahim. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you feel like that was what this is why was because for some reason they had already kind of peered into what he was doing? They're like, we can't give any attention to this dude because he knows what he's doing. Because I'm sure they tried to take him out, and instead, because Niger, if I'm not mistaken, Niger was the last. Mali and Burkina Faso, they took back their governments first. Niger was last, and they only focused on Niger, although Burkina Faso had already. So was it because do you think they already was like, they're following his example, we cannot give any attention to this dude?
So I actually think they probably underestimated all three countries. So the one move that I know this for a fact because I've spoken to someone who has links within the French intelligence establishment. The one thing they did not expect was that the three countries were going to come together and become a confederation, and we're going to do so in record time. They didn't expect that. So what they expected was that the three countries would have some measure of cooperation, but they'd silo themselves away, which is what Africans tend to do, and then they'd pick them off one by one. That's what they expected. So one by one. So this Traore guy who's making all these noises, he's irritating, but we'll take him out eventually. Niger is the priority. We need to ensure that we take this back right now. And then that didn't work out. And then all three countries came together and became an alliance, then a confederation. Then they developed a common passport. They're developing a common currency, common infrastructure plan. It's like, no, Africans are not supposed to do this. Who gave you guys these ideas? You people are not supposed to come together. You're supposed to silo yourselves off away from each other and make it easy for us to pick you off one by one. right? So that's the issue. These three have made it much harder to pick them off because they've come together. They've aggregated their resources. They've aggregated.
Is it true that Burkina Faso has been sending, like, the money that they've been making from the industrialization process, they've actually been using to help other African nations?
I don't know about other African nations, but I know within the Alliance of Sahel, definitely.
That's interesting to me, considering they're still developing, right? That they're doing better, but they're still developing, and yet still
but they understand. They understand very clearly that if they cannot defend their perimeter as a group, then they're all dead.
Exactly.
They understand that very, very clearly. So, and that's what impresses me about the three of them, that they understand very clearly that this is not about Niger, it's not about Mali, it's not about Burkina Faso, it's about Africa. So they understand that very clearly. So one of the things that they've done,
you gotta give me the skinny, if you will, on Nigeria, because I feel like Nigeria fits into this whole puzzle in a way that's a little bit like they fit, but they don't. They're part of the puzzle, but they don't. The piece don't fit yet, but it should, right? Given it's part of West Africa, given the influence Nigeria has, how important Nigeria is to the empire, but also how important Nigeria is to the rest of Africa. Where do you see Nigeria by the end of this in the next couple of years? Because I feel like if Nigeria were to become part of this alliance, which it's possible, right? It is possible. It could be massive for like that. That would be like the tipping point. The rest of the African nations might just fall in line because it's in their best interest. And then you're talking about the potential for them to actually get the rest of Africa to get back control. Really, not like so with China, for example. I feel like China oftentimes is able to take advantage of the fact that there are not really many options for Africans to pursue as far as helping to modernize their nations, right? So if Nigeria joins to the fold and Africa is looking and they're like, yo, okay, it's time for us to go ahead and get on board. I feel like that would be like the tipping point leading to true independence for Africa as a continent.
So, whenever I'm asked about Nigeria, there's this feeling of hot shame and embarrassment that just comes over me, because it's like at best it's a total spectator. At best, if I'm being charitable, it's a total spectator in all of this. But the truth is, it's not a total spectator. It's actually on the side of the empire. That's the truth. The current Nigerian establishment, the current Nigerian government is fully bought and paid for. They are part of the empire. That's the truth. So, you had the president of Niger coming out a few months ago and saying that France has a base in northern Nigeria from where terror attacks into Niger are being coordinated. Right? Like, that's the role Nigeria is playing. Like, Nigeria tried to invade Niger militarily. They actually tried to do that 2 years ago. Right. And
I remember, on behalf of France, because they were about to kick out France, and they were like, we got something for y'all, and it didn't work out. Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, and the Nigerian president then is obviously still the president now. He's become even more of a puppet since then. He's sort of migrated away from Joe Biden toward Nicolas Macron. So he spends all his time in Paris now. He's always in Paris. He's always in France.
This is to do with the fake diploma or fake college degree?
That's him. Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's him. So he's Nigeria right now.
I thought they got rid of him.
Nigeria is not in good shape. Nigeria is just not fundamentally positioned right now to lead anything. It's just not in good shape. So when I talk about West Africa moving forward, I just tend to omit Nigeria. Like, okay, that's the one thing we're just gonna act like it's not there. We're just gonna, So like West Africa starts from like Benin. So anything to the east of Benin, it's not really there. So we're just talking about the countries that seem to know what's good. Because the truth is, as you said, Nigeria, if it were to get its act together, if it were to do the obvious thing, which is join in with this, that would be an absolute game changer. Absolute. Because a lot of the industrial capacity that these guys don't have already exists in Nigeria. Nigeria, even though Nigeria is not by any means an industrialized country, Nigeria does have a very large industrial base. A lot of things which to them are things that they're going to have in the next 10 to 15 years, are things that already exist in Nigeria. So, for example, steel refining and stuff like that already exists in Nigeria. So the conditions for industrialization and the infrastructure is already there. It's being deliberately and systematically sabotaged, and has been the case all my life. And at this point, I'm actually worried that if Nigeria were to gain influence in that bloc, it will be a destructive influence. So I'm actually happy
I was going to ask you that.
for things to remain as they are right now. So I actually think maybe what needs to happen for Nigeria to reform itself is that another power bloc like the AES needs to develop nearby, and then it becomes clear and evident that they are more successful. Because currently, I think the AES has a total population of about 72 million people. What Nigeria has had over the rest of West Africa is that its population is so much more than everyone else. So you have Ghana is like 31 million people, and Nigeria is like 240 million people. So it's like it's this huge, it's the big brother. But when you have the AES, collectively 72 million, that's already a very big economy. And then when they manage to develop a permanent route to the sea, because currently their main problem is that they're landlocked. So they need to do business with Ghana, with Togo, or with Morocco to get access to the sea. It's a delicate balancing act. But once they're able to absorb one of those countries, I'm very hopeful about Togo, into the alliance, and then the alliance has a permanent port. The economic boom that's going to come out of there is going to make it very clear that Nigeria is onto nothing. And then that will create the conditions for Nigeria to reform itself. That's actually what I think is more likely to happen at this point.
So that's probably going to be like a decade-long process. Do you think that so in America, oftentimes the working class is used against itself because they are pitched this lie, or this fantasy rather, that one day they will become part of the elite, the establishment. Do you feel like that is like something that's prominent in Nigeria, where there are people who don't want to let go of the possibility of the benefits of being a Westerner, right? Because I know like most of the Africans that I know growing up, they were all Nigerian. Like I lived in North Carolina, in Fayetteville, and the ones who often moved there were almost exclusively Nigerian. Everyone who played sports was Nigerian. Hell, almost everybody from the NFL, if they play in the NFL, they're normally Nigerian. So for whatever reason, there's a strong connection between Nigeria and the rest of the West. And I feel like with that embedded is a belief that one day you could be one of those, right? And it's scary to potentially lose that unique position Nigeria seems to have amongst other African nations. Do you feel like that's a part of the reason why they're scared to revolutionize in a way that you would see like what we've seen in Burkina Faso, Mali, or Niger?
So I think that's the case for the Nigerian diaspora that's based in the West. I think unlike other diasporas, the Nigerian diaspora in particular has this very unfortunate idea that the minute you step out of Nigeria and you move to America, you move to the UK, you move to Europe, maybe you become a US permanent resident, you become a US citizen, that then makes you American in the same way that someone who owned slaves, whose ancestors owned slaves in the 1700s is an American. And that's just not the truth. That's just not the case, right? Let's be honest with ourselves. It's just not the case, right? Like, and that's not just for America. That's for pretty much everywhere in the West. Citizenship is tiered, whether we want to admit it or not. That's just the reality.
Oh, it's definitely tiered. It is definitely like me being. So I live in Brazil. Like once I become a full-fledged Brazilian citizen, I'm still American. Like it's easy. Even the process of me becoming a citizen is easier because I'm American. Like it's that's just the reality of the situation. Now, if someone from Angola wanted to become a Brazilian citizen, they still have a reasonable track because it's Portuguese, part of the Portuguese Empire, or was part of the Portuguese Empire. They're fluent Portuguese speakers as well, but it's still harder from somebody from Angola, even with their specialized status, to become a Brazilian citizen than it would be for me. And once they become one, it's not the same thing. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just not.
Exactly. And unfortunately, a large part of Nigeria's diaspora is just fundamentally deluded about that. A large part of Nigeria's diaspora believes that they are German, they are British, they are American, they are Canadian. And the truth is you're not. You're Nigerian American, you're Nigerian British, you're Nigerian Canadian, right? It's hyphenated. It's not the same thing, but they really don't understand it. So that's definitely the case for the diaspora. They have this terminal case of, wanting to be what they're not. Now, with the population at home, it's more a thing of that lack of access to information that I talked about earlier. Even though this population now has smartphones and high-speed internet and they're deluged with information 24/7 like the rest of the world, I think the conditioning over the course of decades is taking a very long time to cut through the noise. The conditioning has been that as a Nigerian, you are first of all the basic idea of like nationalism and self, even just basically understanding Nigeria's place in the world, or understanding Africa's place in the world, that the reason that you can see poverty around you is because there are other people in the world who need you to be poor. And that your rise out of poverty is not a thing of individual hard work, but it's a thing of group. Knowledge that exists in the nation.
Repeat that last part. In Nigeria. Repeat that last part again. You froze up a little bit. You said rising out of poverty isn't a matter of individualism.
Yeah. So that understanding that economics is not a matter of personal virtue, that understanding does not exist in the Nigerian popular imagination at all. Everyone thinks that they're gonna become rich, they're gonna make it, and they're gonna do so as individuals in a vacuum.
Yeah. Right. That's a problem. That's a problem with Americans too, right? That's Black Americans.
Yeah, but the thing is, as terrible as it sounds, Americans actually have a significantly, even though it's a small chance of happening, there's a significantly greater chance of it happening in America than in Nigeria. Because think about it logically, since Nigeria became independent in 1960, how many millions of Nigerians have existed, and how many millions of them have prayed and believed that they were going to make it one day? How many of them made it statistically? Statistically, most Nigerians they lived poor, they died poor, their children are still poor, and they're going to.
That's true. I guess when you put it like that,
a lot of people just don't want to deal. Yeah, a lot of people don't want to deal with that reality, so they'd rather delude themselves into thinking that there's this pot of gold at the end of some rainbow somewhere. So all I need to do is work hard enough. Maybe if I can get a visa to America, things are gonna be great. Or if I can become a football player, I can be this. I can go to Europe and become a hit song, become a superstar musician. If I can do this, so everyone is just fixated on their individual pot of gold. And the truth is that 99% of them will never get to any pot of gold. They're just going to live very small lives and die. And when you try to explain this, that look, progress only happens as a result of group action. People they really struggle. They really struggle to understand it. Nigeria is like one of the most capitalist countries in the world.
It's only in Nigeria that they struggle because I met a group of Nigerian Englishmen here in Brazil. They were on vacation. They don't have a problem understanding that when they're in other countries. They have a huge community and they rely on each other to find success when they get to whatever country they're going to. A lot of them work together. Their parents had worked together. They went to school together. They help, organize these trips together. They network together. And it's funny because I'm thinking to myself, that's crazy that y'all understand that concept here. But and it's the same thing for Black people in the States. Like I said, like when y'all leave the US, y'all understand the concept of community, but whenever you get back there, it's everything has to be earned by myself. I got to do it. I did it, and I don't need anybody. It's super strange how that works.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're cousins. Our behaviors are very similar across the Atlantic.
Yeah, Nigerians especially. I feel like Nigerians and American Black people have so much in common. I don't know how.
Which is why we don't get along, because we're very similar.
Because I feel like it's the same thing with Barbadians and Black African Americans. They oftentimes get along so well that you wouldn't even know a Bayesian is Bayesian unless you ask them, right? Jamaicans and American Black Americans they have a weird like competition thing kind of going on. I don't know what it's about. Like maybe because of the cultural aspect. Probably the same thing with the rest of like the how the relationship with Black Americans and the rest of the African world is. Like we're seeing it as different because we don't really have our own culture. At least that's what people believe. But like, yeah, American Black people and Nigerians, generally speaking, like Nigerians after they've been. My friend, he was actually here recently in Brazil, but I went to school with him. So when he came to middle school, he had an accent for like a year or two. He completely got rid of it. And to the point where we all forgot that he talked like that because he got rid of it and he talked exactly like us and he only hung out with us. We thought he never talked like that again, but when he's with his family, that he still talks like that. He speaks with his, yeah, exactly. He's still speaking English. He speaks what's the language you guys speak? Yoruba,
yes.
Yeah, Yoruba. He speaks that, but when he's with his family, he's speaking English. He still speaks in his Nigerian English accent. I was like, why do you do that? Why won't you just speak a language or speak how you know? He's like, actually, I don't know. He said, but I feel like he said people made fun of him a little bit whenever he was in middle school. So he learned how to speak with our accent, which is like a Southern Black accent, basically. And when he's at home, I guess because he was just so used to speaking how he spoke to with his parents, and his parents probably wouldn't put up with it. Like he spoke with an English Nigerian accent. I was like, that's crazy, bro. He's like, yeah, I completely forgot I would do it. He's like, I wouldn't even do it on purpose. It was just something that would happen. But he fit in with the American Black people like it was nothing. And then while simultaneously I witnessed some other, I can't remember what country they were from, but they were other Africans who had a lot of problems fitting in with American Black people and instead hung out with Latinos, which was a whole different thing. But they weren't Nigerian. All the Nigerians, they got along fine with Black Americans to the point where like most of the Nigerians I know became the plug. Like that's where people went to go get their drugs from. I ain't gonna lie to you. That was a whole thing. It was like, yeah, they either own something or they're the drug dealer. Like that was basically how I went in my. Funny was a lot of the times it was unnecessary for them to deal with drugs. I'm not really sure what that was about because their parents had money. So maybe one day you can explain that to me. Why Nigerians feel like they should be drug dealers.
There's a whole very toxic hustler culture as well. So even when you really don't need to, you're just constantly like you just need more and more and more. Even you don't know why you need it. You know, it's why I'm always trying to sort of like I feel like Nigerians need therapy. To be honest, if that makes sense. Like maybe therapy is not the word, but I feel like there's some social engineering that needs to take place because I think there's been a lot of information warfare that has happened without our knowledge over the decades that has sort of convinced us to act in certain ways and to do certain things that in the real sense of it don't actually make any sense, but we just do them because apparently it's what you do. Why not? And when you sort of take a step back and look at the wider angle, you're like, this does not help at all.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, bro, that's like I said, so much the Nigerians and Black Americans have so much in common. It's what's strange is like at first I thought it was like maybe a Black thing, right? Not because of our skin color, but basically because of the conditioning, because of the trauma, the collective trauma that we've all experienced to some degree, even if it's generations down the line. And then when I moved to Brazil, so I don't know if you know, Brazil has like the largest African population next to
outside of Africa.
Yeah, it's only Nigeria has more, which is crazy when you think about it. And then because like, bro, when I walk around here, the first time I ever came to Rio was the first time I actually didn't feel like I was just like a Black. I didn't feel like I was a Black person walking around in the city. I just felt like I was walking around in the city. And I was treated as such. Was it not saying that there's not racism that exists? Obviously, there's like racism in Africa, right? So like, yeah, there's like a couple of people, but the racism here is not really like that. It's like the Germans and the Dutch have their own little special group, which is a whole different thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's a class problem more than anything. Yeah. So that's kind of where it ends for the most part. So whenever the way I interact with Black people here, I'm what I would probably be considered aggressive in the way I communicate and I would like you said, the toxic hustler culture thing is something that I was prone to whenever I moved here. Not like a bad way. I was just like, I worked probably more than I needed to. I was always stressed about work, even when I wasn't working, because that's just something I developed while living in the States. Cause you always feel like you're behind, even if you're ahead. And I remember my wife had constantly having to tell me like, yo, calm down. Like, why are you walking so fast, for example? I'm like, well, I'm just trying to get to where we're going. What do you mean? She's like, what? Do we got like a time we got to be there? I said, nah, she's like, then why are you walking so fast? I would complain if she was late, or if like we were do a gathering and everybody else was late, or if I showed up somewhere, people were 10, 15 minutes late. And she's like, yeah, you do know Brazilians, like, we're not like that. Like, if we make plans, somebody makes plans to go over your house that day, like, you tell them a time, but it's like the time where they could get there. That doesn't mean they're going to get there at that time, because when you make plans with somebody, it's like to hang out the whole day. So I'm like, but I could get something done. What do you mean? She's like, but you took the day off. I'm like, but I could get something done still. She was like, you need to chill. Like, this is crazy. And like, when I took a step back and thought about it, I'm like, she's right. Why am I like this? Like, when it's time to work, you work. And if not, then relax. But we, especially in America, like, the Black hustle culture is a thing where, like, you brag about working 2-3 jobs. And it's like, really, when you think about it, that's not something to brag about. That's sad that we're in that state of affairs.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something like it's when you say like we need therapy, like, yeah, like I feel like there's a collective trauma that maybe once again, I guess because Nigerians have been so westernized, right? And they've been subject to the same type of propaganda that Black Americans have been subject to. And there is, I mean, I've gone to therapy, so like it works. It works. But I remember when I talked to my therapist specifically about that, like, yo, am I okay? Like, why am I acting like that? She was like, well, it's not that you're acting weird. It's just that you're not accustomed to this lifestyle, and you're probably being forced to reassess your habits. And it's just like, those were the habits that you needed to survive and succeed in a different environment. And that's not necessarily what you need to do in the environment that you're in, nor is it expected of you. And so from that perspective, I feel like it's true. I'm like, damn, bro. Like, so what? It's one thing if I was like in a position where I needed to survive and I need to work that much and stress that much. But even the people who are in a position where they need to survive don't stress as much as I was stressing, bro. These people out here working 12 hours a day. But if they have a choice between working 3 or 4 days a week and spending time with their family on the weekends and make a little bit less, or like working 12 more hours, to make a little bit more, whereas the average American would absolutely pick up that extra shift. They're like, hell no, I'm gonna chill with my family and barbecue and drink this 12 pack of beer that I worked all week for. I work to relax. I don't work to work more. And that lifestyle is actually preferable, actually. Like, it's not the best all the time, yeah, but there's a problem. I feel like the toxicity of hustle culture is more problematic in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I feel like we also kind of neglects to address the fact that people believe that hustle culture leads to you being wealthy, or at least that's the outcome that's most likely when the wealthiest people work the least.
Nope.
Nobody wants to talk about that contradiction.
You just die stressed, and that's it.
You just die stressed. Exactly. And you can't take the money with you, man. So it is what it is, man. But I appreciate that you even bringing that fact up, because there is a toxicity that needs to be addressed. And I feel like once again, when you talk about the things that are impeding Nigeria from joining this alliance in a way that would be productive, it's some of the stuff that we see in America, which stops Black people from being productive in working together, right? We got it. Like, we have like Atlanta, for example. The fact that we even have Atlanta where Black people own so much and they're so successful is amazing in and of itself. But it's sad at the same time that it's like, oh, Atlanta's a Black Mecca. Well, why is there only one? When there's so much Black money.
We know why there's only one, and it's not entirely because of Black. In fact, it's not because of Black people. Because exactly. every time there was one, it got burned to the ground. So
exactly. But it's like, why haven't we been able to recover is a question that we need to really address. And we know there's various answers to that, but the question still needs to be addressed. And I feel like, once again, it's just that fear of acknowledging the lack of power that we've had to some degree for such a long time. Like, nobody likes to feel like, I feel like nobody likes to admit that they bought into lies that were sold to them. Right? There's like it doesn't.
Speaking for myself, it was humiliating to realize that I didn't know half of what I thought I knew. Because like as recently as maybe 3-4 years ago, I was like a very different person. So I was very much plugged into this thing I'm always talking about, is this NGO civil society complex. I was very much plugged into it as recently as 4 years ago. So I used to parrot all of these narratives and stuff. I used to say, you know, Robert Mugabe is a terrible person and all that kind of stuff. You know, I thought I understood the issues, but I guess the real wake-up call for me was like between 2022 and 2023, where the Nigerian election was coming up, and I did a story about the person who is now the president. And this story clearly indicated that this guy has a criminal history in the US. And the US government knows very, very, very much about it. And, you know, it got to the point where in partnership with a guy called Aaron Greenspan, you know, we filed an FOIA, and the FOIA was rejected. And I was confused. Why would you reject an FOIA about a foreign public official? What's it to you? And then we took it to court. And, you know, then over the course of 18 tortuous months, all my assumptions about what the US really is just came tumbling down one by one. And I realized I thought that the Nigerian government was corrupt, and I didn't understand what corruption was. Like, Nigerian government's corruption is like baby level corruption. Like, this is corruption comparatively. Like, these are the guys that wrote the book on corruption. Like, Nigeria is still on chapter 1, right? And then you know, then I started to understand that, right, there is a global system at play here, and you do not have as much agency as you think you have. You do not have as much power as you think you have, and all the running around you've been doing, thinking you're making a difference, you were just part of someone else's plan. It's not everyone who's capable of sort of accepting that reality and not being totally crushed by it. I mean, you
can be crushed by it, but because I went through that. Like, I used to think that I knew everything. Well, not everything about everything, but that at least knew how to get the answers, right? I was like a straight A student. And even after I was subject to propaganda, I broke out of some of that propaganda and thought that I was ahead of the game. And then once again, similar situation, I guess, when I started this lawsuit against the Democratic Party after they cheated everybody. And I mean, even my idea of the duopoly was crushed because the person who ultimately ended the lawsuit was Clarence Thomas. When it would have ultimately, you would assume, you know, Clarence Thomas, being a Republican, would ultimately want the Republican Party to benefit from the Democratic Party damn near going bankrupt because of $900 million. No, he killed it before the Supreme Court could even hear it. And I'm like, wow, so this is what this is. Okay, I need to completely reassess everything I thought I knew about politics. I thought that Democrats wanted to win. I thought that they would at least act within their best interests, right? But either party rather, and neither of them do. It's, you know, they act within for their own interests individually, and if it happens to benefit the party, then so be it. But really, the parties are working for one another, and they're not separate as they would like to portray themselves as being. They just play their part. They're just actors, effectively. Some of them are better than others. And once I kind of had that realization, I'm thinking like, then what the hell can people do? Because they don't even need to follow the law. So what do we do now? And I mean, it was hard to deal with, but at the end of the day, once you reach that point, you can at least get to solving the problem. Because before that, I thought I knew what the problem was, and I was completely wrong.
Yeah, same here. Completely misdiagnosed it, and was completely going off on a tangent. But
right? Thinking like, yeah, man, I know everything about it. I got the answers, man, or at least I know what the problem is. No. And that's got to be exceptionally difficult to process when you're part of a nation where you're like, I want to fix the government. Like, you want to fix the government or help to fix the government in Nigeria. But it's like, but they're not even in control of themselves. So it's like, no matter what change you make, you know that there's other forces exerting power on them from outside. And that's like the issue that they have here in Brazil. Is like, they know finally they're figuring it out because of the situation with Lula. And a lot of times when I talk to other Brazilians, they find out how much influence America has over this country after I talk to them about it. They didn't
know? Because there's been a lot more research material produced on imperialism in Latin America and Africa.
It's like the same thing, right? Most people in Brazil if they had access to the internet, and if they had access to like TV even, or social media, it was like within the last 4 or 5 years, because everybody assumes that everywhere is like São Paulo, Brasilia, or Rio, or Salvador Bahia. But the majority of the country's in the interior. So you're thinking about like Maranhão, where my wife is from, bro. When she told me she worked in a farm or on a farm when she was growing up, and that her dad works on a farm still, I'm over here thinking like, oh, her dad works for a farm. No, she meant that they grow everything. They had their own food. They build their own houses. They built everything themselves. Her dad didn't get a cell phone until like 2.5 years ago, bro.
Wow.
She never had a TV growing up, and she didn't watch TV for the first time until she moved to Rio in like 2013, 2014.
I said, in rural Africa then.
Yeah, that's the majority of Brazil. Yeah, basically. That is the majority of Brazil. And when I thought about it like that, because she was explaining to me that there are things that, like, she'll turn on the subtitles for a movie because the accent is so much different and the slang is so much different and from that part of Brazil that she can't understand it without subtitles. Wow. And I'm like, but it's Portuguese. She's like, yeah, but no one from that country or from that state travels to my state and vice versa. We don't have anything for each other. If one person from my state met somebody from that state, it's because we both went to Rio or we both went to São Paulo. You get what I'm saying? So I'm like, oh shit. She's like, yeah, the majority of the people didn't really start understanding each other's slang until social media became popular, which was within the last 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
So yeah. So imagine politics.
Oof.
Exactly. Imagine politics. That's what I'm saying. Like when you get to, it's like, so damn.
Basically, this mega elite that's just living on a different planet to everyone else.
Exactly. For the thing that they were interested in, they were already having trouble being interconnected in the way that they influence each other. Imagine something like politics, which you already feel kind of powerless about, right? They understand a little bit about their local politics, but when it comes to like the federal level, bro, the capital of Brazil used to be Rio. Yeah, too many black people, too many people that they actually represent live here. So, which means you could probably be held accountable if you keep your capital here. So they just create a fake place. Brasilia is a fake place, bro. It wasn't a place. They just created a whole city to be the capital where all the federal politicians live. I'm not even bullshitting. I found that out last year. I said, hold up, what? Like, yeah, because it would make sense that Rio is the capital. Everything happens here. And they have access to the sea, which makes sense. Yeah, nah, nope. They took that shit, uprooted it, and it wasn't even that long ago, and just said, yeah, Brasilia is the capital now, because otherwise you got to be held accountable. And as you've seen, the majority of Brazilian politicians at the federal level don't look like the average Brazilian, and by that I mean they're white.
They're white,
and that is not Rio. So, yeah, that's what happened. So. It's very interesting how just a slither of information, which might be how we're seeing the world change so rapidly at this moment in time that we're in, is because at only recently, so many people who previously never had access to this information, never had access to translators, never had access to TikTok, to Facebook, to Instagram, to Twitter, or if they did have access, it was very limited. And they don't have access to good education, and so they weren't learning really at all. And then now they're learning. They don't have to, if they're getting information from the schools, 9 times out of 10 it's fake, right? So the first time they're learning, they're not having to be reprogrammed like we were. They're getting the information straight from the horse's mouth. I was Western educated, so I was taught a bunch of lies from the moment I set foot in school. And I'm pretty sure it's pretty. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're getting the information straight from the horse's mouth from the moment they enter social media without having to go through the reprogramming. So, which is why we're seeing, I feel like, countries and really the dialogue change so rapidly.
That's very illuminating. I never thought that Brazil had that political mix.
Yeah, me neither, dog. I would have never known. And I would travel here a couple of times before that, but like, just my wife not being from one of the major cities, like, kind of like opened my eyes to everything. Like, even she was like kind of joking, like, oh yes, it's like the elections have come, so people are going to start like trying to run, and they're probably not going to really try to win. I'm like, what? She's like, oh, here they actually will pay you the moment that you announce that you're going to run, so that everyone has a fair chance to win. I said, excuse me? It's like, yeah, people will just run. Like, even in my city, there are people who run and they'll accidentally win because they got paid to campaign. Because if you want to change the country or your city, they feel like you should be able to. I said, that's actually in practice. I mean, in theory, that's actually a brilliant idea. She's like, because you're not allowed to spend more than the other person in Brazil, technically speaking. So to make sure that that's the case, every election, every level has a certain amount that they give, but like they'll give you like 10,000 reais to run in your local election. The other person can only spend 10,000, right? And may the best man or woman win, and which is like, oh shit, like that's probably exactly what we should be doing in the U.S. Holy shit, how much would be extremely different if that's how elections were ran in the U.S. And they only have a window. I think that's for a lot of countries that's how it works. But in Brazil, they have a window to campaign. You can't start campaigning 2 or 3 years in advance. Like that shit don't work. Here it's illegal. Which once again, I'm like, that seems pretty reasonable. And for their local elections, they do get a lot of accountability. It's not perfect, but their local, like for example, the mayor of Rio, or excuse me, the mayor would be the mayor of Rio. He won overwhelmingly, and everybody knew in advance because he was the only one who took the money that was given to him by the government. And he heard everybody was complaining about there was no air conditioners and Wi-Fi on these buses. This man, he went overboard. He gave all the buses air conditioning. You know, public transportation is a big deal here, and he put air conditioner Wi-Fi in that little. When you're spending an hour and a half commuting from one place from house to work, and then another hour and a half commuting from work to the crib, especially at the long day of work. When you living in Rio, that air conditioning is life changing, right, bro? This man won because of air conditioning, but everybody knew about it. He did what he was supposed to do with the money, and it was like something that it was tangible, right? And he knew that whenever people were gonna whenever the election was gonna come back up, that somebody was going to have to explain what they did, because it was a lot of people who ran. Like, what are you going to do tangibly that's going to change lives? And they couldn't compete with the air conditioning on the buses, bro. But I feel like damn, bro, like shit is like that what we need in the U.S. But they obfuscate. They don't need the money from the government because they get so much money from donors and lobbyists. Like I don't know how we fix that. For example, it's crazy to me that Congress was able to put term limits on the president when no one has the power to put term limits on them. Right? Is to make sure so the president has to do is basically in y'all's hand and has to do exactly what y'all say all the time, basically. And no one can, but that doesn't work for y'all. Like, how does that? Because term limits, in my opinion, are actually unconstitutional. In my humble opinion, especially because I know the motivation behind it in the U.S. and the majority of the world doesn't have term limits, and there's a reason for that, because if the will of the people is to be done, they voted somebody in, then okay, that was their choice. If they want the same person fucking 20 times in a row, then that's their choice. So, but in the U.S., like the fact that they were able to get away with term limits at the executive branch, whenever one branch they're supposed to all check each other. But Congress is able to disproportionately put the executive branch in check in a way that no other branch can do. And that has led to what? Probably everything that we've seen so far. They know no matter what change you make, yeah, go ahead. We're going to, in 8 years at the most, we'll go ahead and get rid of all that shit. There's nothing you can do about it, which is scary. So... Hey, anyway, man, I don't want to hold you up too much longer. Let everybody know what you got coming up next and where they can find you at.
Okay, well, so where to start from? Okay, so I run a website called West Africa Weekly. That's westafricaweekly.com. It's a news website that focuses on West Africa and the Sahel region. And one of the things one of the projects we're working on over the next 2 to 3 months is we're actually going to Burkina Faso, and our goal is to capture the country on camera, just as it is. as much visual material as possible. And the reason for that is there's been this awful proliferation of these like AI videos and like all sorts of stuff just flying around.
Yeah, you talk about that purposeful propaganda that they're doing to try to.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we suspect actually that there's a French foreign intelligence operation that is pushing out a lot of this stuff to basically narratively discredit the revolution in the Sahel. So what we are trying to do is basically just use the truth to defeat the narrative. So we're just going to go there. And we've actually invested quite a bit of money in this. There's 14 members. We book flights and everything. We're going there. We're just going to take a whole bunch of visuals and pictures and just capture the country as it is. Like, this is what is happening. These are the shovels that are in the ground. This is the construction that's going on. These are the developments you need to see. Hopefully we get to speak to a few people in the government as well. And basically just put stuff out there, because I feel like part of what started changing Africa's narrative was that people started having visual access to Africa in a way that didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, I mean, except you could,
and you want to try to bring some legitimacy to that.
Africa. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Sound went out.
Hello? Hello?
No.
Hello? What's going on? Hello?
I make sure it isn't me, but I feel like it.
Okay, I think I'll just pop off my...
It might be me. Hold on. Say something. Yeah, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me. Okay, so it wasn't me then. It was from your...
Make sure, go to your settings and make sure that your mic didn't switch accidentally. That happens sometimes.
Yeah, it's not me. I think the issue is from your end.
That's crazy. Man, look at the government watching. Boy, look at this. Boy, the government be y'all. This is what happens, y'all. This is what happens. Y'all can hear them? Okay, go ahead, continue. They said they can hear you, so I'm gonna see if it's on my end.
Okay, so yeah, I was saying, so that's sort of like the main project that we have lined up for the second half of 2025. We want to capture Burkina Faso and the rest of the AES on camera and just basically let the truth displace the lies, basically. Obviously, we're also very big on doing some fact-checking work because, as you also know, there's an information war going on. The French Foreign Intelligence Agency, the DGSC, is currently pushing out a lot of material using French state mouthpieces like AFP and France 24 and Jeune Afrique, RFI, the usual stuff, to sort of ritually demonize the people that they don't like across Africa. So what we're going to do, and what we have been doing, is tackling a lot of this stuff narratively. Like, we don't play defense, we're playing offense. That's basically the goal of what we're doing. So that's it for West Africa Weekly. And then obviously in a personal capacity, I'm doing videos with Hotspots. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm good. That was strange. That was, I don't know what that was about. We just switched places, which is all strange, but it's cool. Go ahead.
Right. So I was saying, so that's it for West Africa Weekly. Now, personally, I'm obviously still doing videos with Hotspots, which obviously I'm enjoying a lot. I'm doing a bit
videos
of work.
Are dope, bro. Yeah, if y'all have not looked at David's videos, go to David's videos on Hotspot, bro. He be dropping some fire clips. Even somebody just commented before the show that you've been teaching him everything about Africa in just a short amount of time that you've been, doing videos for Hotspot that they didn't even know about. So we appreciate you.
Always good to hear that. I'm also doing some work with African Stream, which you may have heard of. They were labeled by Anthony Blinken as Russian sponsored, run by RT, and then got kicked off every platform in existence except Twitter and Rumble. So be that as it may, we're still doing what we're doing.
Did they able to get back on the IG? I thought they were back.
No.
Were able to get back. No.
So the founder, Ahmed, he's still on IG. So he's become like the de facto African Stream page because he posts all this stuff on his handle. But the actual handle is still suspended.
That's crazy.
And by the way, by the way, Anthony Blinken never actually bothered to submit a tiniest shred of evidence. He just said.
They don't need evidence. They just, that's what they do, bro. But they,
yeah, we got like it was like a movie. The way we got kicked off everything so quickly. We just woke up in the morning. Google was like, you couldn't log into your mail. Google, it kicked us off. Google Workspace, YouTube terminated the account. Instagram, Threads, Facebook.
Bro, that is kind of scary.
Yeah, within like 5 hours.
It was all in one morning?
Yeah, everything just that was
scary.
A day.
That's scary, bro. Because it's like it'd be one thing if it was something that happened over the course of like a week or two, right? You losing some access, but when it all happened the same day. Yeah, that means it was coordinated.
The emperor has spoken, and all we do is we carry out the emperor's wishes. And anyway, that's the so-called democracy. Anyway, less about
that. I don't know what that means out there, but the US don't got it. That's what I told people whenever. I remember when Alex Jones got kicked off of social media, and everybody was like, "But he violated the terms and conditions." I said, "No, hold on. If he did that, why didn't they ban him a while ago? And why?" Like everybody has the exact same terms and conditions, and also they all talk to each other that day beforehand to kick him off at the same time, even out of the apps. So Google Play and Apple had a conversation. It was like, we're going to ban him today at this hour, right? Off the App Store. Like, y'all don't find that little bitch suspicious? I don't care if you like Alex Jones, because it's not going to stop at Alex Jones. And it surely did not. And that was what my fear was, and it definitely came true. But we're out here striving and surviving and still trying to persevere, because like you said, even the information that has been able to get out, look at how much has been changing the world. So we're gonna keep doing our thing. Appreciate you, David. Twitter, your Twitter account.
Oh, the Twitter handle is at David Hundeyin. That's DavidHundeyin.
Yeah. So make sure to go follow him there as well.
Same on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Good stuff. And for all you guys, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream interview on For the People podcast. Make sure y'all like this video, share this video, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at Real Niko House, and follow us obviously on Hotspot at Hotspot on X. Other than that, always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.
Cheers.